I clicked the link show channel here over at SubScribestar. Harry Potter, but brown and probably gay this time. So they're remaking the streaming show version of Harry Potter, and the slacktivists Rachel Leishman over at the Mary Sue. I'm sure says they're going to protect the kid actors from social media or something. I hope their parents are keeping them off social media, as every parent should keep their kids off social media. But if you're an actor, yeah, that goes double for them. So they're remaking this show, and obviously they should. I mean, everything now is remakes because they can't come up with anything new and original because it would just be woke right from the start. So they have to do this bait and switch where you have name recognition for a show, and then it turns out to be like the Disney version of Star Wars, where everything is two lesbians kissing in the background, which sounds like the Indian name when they first come out of the tent joke. So it has the potential to be a cash cow because who doesn't know the name Harry Potter? I mean, it's probably even bigger than Star Wars for the under 30 crowd, I guess the millennials. Except this version has removed the charm from the original English version, which was a pretty well put together movie. I didn't see all 8 movies. I saw part of the first one. It was pretty decent, but I did read all the books, I think more than once, and they were solid. They were well-written stories. And they race-swapped in some non-Europeans to please the dark gods that they worship. The thing is, it's, especially after the 2020 Summer of Love and everything that's followed from that, how to say this? Nobody wants diversity. But this is a kids show, and kids are more accepting of stupidity than the adults who are allowing HBO into their house. And the globalist media has to take, I mean, there's no reason you should be paying for HBO or Disney or Amazon or any of this kind of stuff. Amazon maybe because it comes with the shipping, I kind of get that, but all this other stuff, there's no need to watch this kind of stuff. 99% of it is toxic. The globalist media has to take every opportunity to brainwash the kids while they're still young. So Hermione, whatever the chick's name is, who was that chick who played her? I don't remember her name. Is Mexican, and Snape is black for some reason. Now, in some ways, making Snape black actually helps the visual storytelling if they stick to the original script, which of course they won't. Because he's the antagonist, at least in the beginning of this story. I think he kind of has a come to Jesus moment at the end of it. But making him visually different from the other characters actually does work in some storytelling, though it's not politically correct, of course. But I'm sure no soy boys are listening to this, because you can show the fair characters as the good guys, and then you just juxtapose it to somebody who, the modern Snape, and you go, well, that's the bad guy, and there's a visual difference, which, obviously makes sense. But then it also kills the story because people are just kind of tired of diversity, non-white characters in general, and I'm sure they're going to change the story to turn him into the victim to accommodate some kind of woke narrative subtext about how everyone is. It wasn't the wizarding like pure blood test. It was actually istophobicism, beyond the whole muggle concept of magic versus non-magic. I'm sure they're going to swap around who the bad guys really are, because the idea of a legitimate black villain, which is how I would write stories, because the that would have like people like Rachel Leishman of the world absolutely lose their mind. In fact, she goes on in another article talking about how it's just so inconceivable you couldn't possibly have a black bad guy. Like, where have you been, Rachel? So it's not allowed in their universe for Browns to be antagonists, where it would be mandatory in mine. So in the story, people like me are not in Hollywood for very good reason. So Snape is a wizard supremacist and is not very fond of the Muggles or Mudbloods or whatever they call them, which is very based. It's good to keep the wizard line pure and unfouled. But J.K. is a liberal, and people seem to have some misunderstanding about her, and writes Snape as the bad guys, and that wizard mixing is fine. That's coming from the story, and the Hermione is like the poor little mixed girl type of subtext in the original, but it was pretty lightly treated. And in the original story, she takes a balanced approach to the interaction of the young Snape and the young Potters. They do like a flashback scene, and the Cool Kids Club, which is what the Harry Potter's parents were and their friends. But it turns out when they took an honest look at these kids when they're in their teens or wizard college or whatever, that both sides were pretty much assholes when they were younger, which, happens a lot of times. But Snape didn't move on. He continued to be a jerk to Harry Potter as he became a professor. So now you have the diversity hire playing the role of the abusive asshole, which I think is great. But people like me don't write for these shows because they would hang us if we did. So they're going to make the everything fake and gay and change the story around. So the Dark Snape Timu edition will be the marginalized and oppressed wizard supremacist who didn't do anything on God, on his mama, free my wizard. Even Leishman says that these nons would never be abusive to kids, which is obviously laughable if you follow the news. And, how do I say this? People also have this misunderstanding about who's hurting kids or who's doing mass Say events using high-velocity lead poisoning. In every crime of essentially a battery against a person, nons, European Americans are not number one in any one of those crimes. And there's this huge misunderstanding because people look at these FBI crime stats and they go, wait a minute, they're excluding gang deletions, mass deletions? Why is that? Why is that, FBI? What? Hey, deep state? Why? How come? Why come you exclude gangs in your records? That's a good question. Not enough people ask that. So she thinks Leishman says this would be like people who hurt kids would be more Epstein territory, which is fair enough and pretty cool that she went there. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. I mean, she said it would be like white men territory, but I'm sure she meant like Epstein because it's literally just in the news. But Snape isn't actually physically abusive in the books or the movie, if I remember right. He's just a jerk. So they're sort of going to make Snape the antagonist, but they'll change the story around enough to make it totally stupid, and everything will, of course, be the fault of the British people for some reason. While the original books and movies had a lot of charm, this is just going to be a woke lecture on whatever soup of the day wokeism is popular. Obviously, the trans thing won't be in there because that's the one thing she puts her foot down on. Yeah, I don't know whatever maybe there'll be like a refugee subplot or something, and maybe there'll be like somebody with a explosive temper sort of thing. But of course, in their world, they make them like blonde hair, blue eyed because that happens. So J.K. Rowling is left wing. She just doesn't believe that men are women. That's the one thing she's had enough on. And the sexes should have their separate spaces. Which I to be fair, I don't know if she actually says that. I think she sticks up for women. I don't know if she says men should have their separate spaces as well, which they should. Everyone should have their men and women should have their separate kind of clubs and things. People used to have their own things. It's kind of nice to have your own space, which is enough for the left to send her death threats and go to her house with her address in the background. It was a bunch of giant men dressed as women, and they held posters. And they went to her house, and they had her address in the background, which is kind of public knowledge, but it's also stochastic terrorism. And they published the photos, and then they said they got chased off of social media or something. The other swap is Hermione. I don't know why I can't pronounce that name. Or who was the chick who played her? I don't friggin' remember. I don't know if she was in anything else after that. She's now brown, which nobody wants and doesn't work at all. And people are really just effing exhausted with this kind of stuff. It turns out that different groups of people really don't like each other. Shocking, I know. The actors should at least look native British. I think she's Mexican. But JK is totally on board with it as a chance to virtue signal, even though she described Hermione's face in the story as white. And then later she says, oh no, it could be any race. It was just, she could be black. It was just the blood rushed from her face and she, her skin got a little bit more pale. It's like, yeah, okay, but I mean, that's not what you meant when you wrote the book. I mean, you just pull the other one. It has bells on it. So if you have like people don't even look like they fit in an English story set in England, that just ruins the story. Snape should tell his story back in Africa. They did have wizarding colleges in every continent. The story set that up. It's like, okay, go have him tell his story over there, and Hermione should tell hers in Mexico or whatever. It's okay to have English people have things just for them, and that's probably a big complaint that people have been talking about is this whole diversity push. Oh yeah, here she says on the screen now. She says that's got a white man written all over it. I mean, that would depend how you want to classify Epstein. Where's it going with this? The thing is that people are upset about is only diversity is only being forced on people of European descent, white, the people of the West. You're not telling some Chinese story and race swapping the Chinese to have more inclusion by putting in Swedish and Nigerians and Russians to tell the Chinese story. Oh yeah, that's absurd. What was that Hawaiian show, Lilo and Stitch? I actually saw that. Atrocious. It just came out. I might do a little talk on that. Because Ohana apparently means girl boss, leaving your family. So it means family, and family comes first, except in the Disney movie 23 years later, when suddenly family does not come first. It actually comes second. It's like, oh, didn't you take the animated movie that came out in 2002, roughly, and they go. So that the whole point of it was Ohana. In fact, there's actually a band called Ohana. It's pretty good. And you just kind of turn that on its head to push your globalist nonsense, and it's literally only been 23 years. That's how fast the Overton window has shifted into a globalist territory. So the thing is, if you're watching mainstream anything, you're not going to make it. It's called, I think this is on HBO. It's called programming for a reason. Oh, yeah, there it is. Consume the propaganda and don't think about the, yeah. Oh, dear God. This is so fucking stupid. Then Rachel Eichmann explains the left-wing conundrum that they have to, it has white men written all over it. You sure about that, Leishman? Really? It's, every time I try to comment on Mary Sue, it turns out that I've been banned. So she explains the left-wing conundrum that they have to boycott the show because they think men can be women, and they're very upset that J.K. Rowling says, no, I'm sorry. It's okay if you're gay. It's okay if you want to dress any way you wish, as long as you don't, you're not around children, you're not hurting anyone. But we don't want you in women's locker rooms, and we don't want you in, I don't know, bathrooms and competing at sports with men. And the reason it doesn't go the other way, why men are not as worried about women, because usually men are bigger and stronger than women. That's just a biological fact. That if a lesbian who's taking testosterone and GH wants to use the men's room, nobody cares. People just look and roll their eyes because, oh, you're 5'4" and you got a little beard on you, and you're all jacked up on growth hormone. Great. So you're probably as strong as a 13-year-old boy. Congratulations. And when it's worse for the women, the biological women who go that route instead of just being happy lesbians, because then they learn what it's like to go through their life as a 5'4" male, which is not a very good thing. Anyway, so they have to boycott the show because she's not trans inclusive, which it's like nobody's actually, you are what you're born as. I don't know what the rules on YouTube. Can I say it's like it's not real, it doesn't exist? It's just cultural Bolshevism. So they also have to protect the child actors, which is a bit of slacktivist virtue signaling, which means their version of like activism is arguing about stupid shit online and not actually having to actually do anything. So what they'll do is probably watch the show in secret as their guilty pleasure because they feel it's their duty as good media consumers, so they can call people Nazis online. I mean, all this, like this version of Trump 2.0, this whole thing just feels really tired. So it's like Summer Love 2.0, what's going to happen? I think even left-wingers are tired of this kind of nonsense. And the thing is, like, there's going to be another Floyd situation. That shit happens all the time. Anyway, so the obvious problem with the diversity show is it's so forced and fake. People want to be around their own tribe, especially after all these events. The real world is showing us pretty clearly, whether it's here, Europe, Canada, Australia, that globalism just doesn't work. And when you see these affirmative action hires on screen, it just doesn't feel right, especially now after all this violence from these forcing together of people. People are very tribal, which is great. And that is definitely the direction to move in, which is why the filthy Hollywood globalists are doubling down on pushing this sort of propaganda, even if it costs them money. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys all next episode.